You're listening to ArTEEtude, a podcast with artists created and produced by Detlef Schlich, a visual artist and ritual designer, living and loving in West Cork, and best known for his essay about the cause and effect of shamanism, art and digital culture. Working in the field of performance, photography, painting, sound, installations, and film, he will dive and discover with us and a weekly creative guest into the unknown and exciting deep ocean of the creative mind.
This is Detlef Schlich, and today we dive into the exciting creative ocean, the exciting ocean of the creative mind, the exciting ocean of the creative mind of Robert Artaine, who had to develop eventually a very creative mind in order to survive, because he used to grow up in an institution, an Irish institution. If you go back to the last podcast from last week, he will tell you more about that. We're not gonna continue too deep what it means to be in this institution, because it used to be quite nasty, and I'm actually happy to have Robert here. I mean, you don't see him in the podcast, you just can hear to his voice, because it's a very, very sensitive subject. So hi Robert, thank you very much for having you here.
Hi again, David.
That's great.
Yeah, bear with me because I have chest infection. Yeah, but,
yeah.
I suffered with my health.
Yeah. So Robert is artist, performer. He's gonna doing his art. I hope we can come in this part as well to his art. I mean, he made a video about this institution, about institutions in general in Ireland. You made it by yourself, didn't you?
Well, yes, I've just started to learn how to play the guitar, because going back in Artaine, which, Golden Bridge before it, there was a lot, both Golden Bridge and Artaine were really the darkness of my childhood. I wasn't taken from my family once or twice. You could say I was taken 5 times. And a redress board would not want, would try and, how can you say, air freshen the stench that we inmates had to suffer, that no human being should have suffered. Just even from the food, the diseases that we had, and the amount of times we ended up in hospital. I actually had my life threatened in Artaine as a kid, and I was thankful to some boys that came into the laundry that I'm still here today. It is shocking, and the experiences day to day is, you feared the following day what happened the day before. You feared the next institution because of what happened in the previous institution. This is the kind of stress that a child is being put through, with no care of any godly, humane or caring person to help. You're hid.
And it was running by the Catholic Church, no?
It was run by the Catholic Church, but you know something.
Who used to be there? Who make the beds, or who was cleaning the rooms, the places, and
the children. The children. There was the adults would never lift a finger. They had the rod. They had the straps, and these straps, like many people would tell you, had coins inside them.
Where came these adults from? Were they priests, monks, or what?
They Christian brothers, and nuns. And I don't know if they were sexually frustrated or not, but there was something seriously wrong with a lot of these people who were running these places. They had no heart. Did
you ever see that they're molesting somebody sexual or hitting or whatever?
We've definitely, that's a kind of like it was commonplace to see it. It was commonplace to feel it. It was commonplace to hear it, to smell it. It was common. It was going on day after day after day after day. It became common to suffer. It became natural to see and hear and feel the pains that you go through, that other kids are going through, and you know what's going on. You hear the screaming, but you can't do nothing. You're helpless. Because you're helpless, you're a child.
So you used to live with 100 children in one room. You slept with 100 other boys in one room, and
more than 100.
Nobody
more
came.
Than 100.
More than 100, yes, and nobody came on the idea if somebody. I mean, what happens? For instance, I try to imagine that for myself, and I try to imagine that for the listeners as well. For instance, you guys are all in that room. You know, it's probably a hall, like a little sport hall, where beds are next to next. And if you guys
you're head to toe, all the way down in rows and rows of beds.
Yeah,
a lot.
And if you guys, if you guys are sleeping there, you know, so okay, so it's a lot of oxygen wise. It's probably very difficult. I don't know what was about the windows. Were they closed? Were they open? Could you actually run away? You know?
No, they weren't. No, they weren't open at night.
They weren't open at night.
We heard people have written and said before that they could hear the children screaming who lived near the institution on the outside. That's how bad it was. They said they could actually hear the screams in the night of children crying out.
And that was the reason they locked the windows or what as well.
So if the windows were open, the sounds would travel. But obviously in the summer, you know, with the stench and whatever going on in the dormitories, you have to open the windows because the smell is just vile, you know.
And what was about the Irish rebels? Nobody really stand up against that, or what?
Sorry.
What was about? I mean, in Germany, if you speak about the Irish, it's the Irish they are rebels and
well, I you know something, I can't even go into that. And that's, you know, I love my country. I love Ireland.
Yes.
I love
Ireland.
Me
too. I mean, I'm living here.
Family,
you know?
my family were part of the freedom of Ireland, and I will stand by Ireland any day. And I love my country. But
yes, I love my country too. I mean, I'm living here.
I didn't have to. Hold on, Detlef. I didn't have to accept what was happening to my childhood, because that childhood makes you as who you are as an adult. Now, many have had good breaks. I didn't have a break in my life. I had to make my own breaks. I had to try, and that's the kind of person I am. I tried to make my own breaks. So.
Why could nobody stand up in the 50s and 60s against that? Why? People knew it, or?
No, you see, you got to understand, the church was selling it as an orphanage, and the poor people, you know, who were the poor children and the poor this. No, they were collecting the money. Let's get this honest, and let's be really, really honest here. Look at the furniture. Look at the idolatry within in any of these religions. There's no need for all that, you know. And even if they were to use their own scripture, thank God I'm self-educated, because I started reading the Bible, I started reading the Quran, I started reading anything I can possibly read to get to understand why. Yeah. So, and then I found that the really hidden treasures of words saying, I shall not be worshipped by any graven image. And then you wonder what because and you know, the amount of money that was, you know, everybody knows it was stacked with wealth, the Catholic Church. And yet these people were still suffering poverty right up to 70s. I'd like to talk about this, Detlef, because this is quite important. With the lack of education, hard work, every single day, if you got a little break here and there for getting out for a week, they like to try and say it's holidays, but it's not. You're a very confused child going. It's very confusing for every child that's been in these institutions. You see, it's so sad that you actually do think of mum and dad only as your parents and your brothers and sisters, and then you have brothers and sisters in the institutions. Now you've got to remember, you probably also had uncles in the same institution and not even know it. You know, you could be related to some of the boys in that institution and not even know it.
So we might maybe put to that Ireland had what was the population, maybe 4 million at this time, or lower, or around that probably, you know, and so if you see countries like towns like Cologne has 1 million, Berlin has a couple of millions, Tokyo has I think 7 million or so. So eventually the whole island is smaller. The population of Ireland is smaller than Tokyo.
Well, we can give a good history on that, Detlef, if you like, but you know I have to still focus from within inside the walls because it's
just to explain a little bit to understand how it is if you grow up in Ireland. You know, it is different. Come on, I mean well, there's other people in other countries will say the same in their countries. You know, in Germany, in England, in America, in you know wherever the Roman Catholic Church has been. But in Ireland, everyone is somehow related to each other because it's so small, you know. So it is.
Yeah. But you know, what makes a country great is the family. The Irish family makes the country great. The Irish family was attacked, right, and it was demoralized. It was made to feel inferior. It was made to feel dirty. It was made to feel a lot of things by this fear of religion. Yeah, you know, the Irish family is the most beautiful family I would say in the world. You know, I see families and their hearts are still good today. You know, and it's something that I wonder why I couldn't have that freedom. You know, I wasn't allowed that freedom to have a family.
Sure.
And that's why yes, I am hurt and I am upset. Am I angry? I was very angry when I was young. I was very angry when I came out of those places. When I was in those places, I've never liked bullies. I just you know, I'm surprised I'm actually even talking to you about this kind of stuff, you know. But I think people should know what's inside these places. But you know something? It's when you come out of them and you manage to survive all that crap and the shit and this torture and the torment and just to you know the insults and the sexual, physical, and emotional abuse, where it's all that this state and this church wanted to look at. Because it privatized your views. So it made your views be your own word. So that you could be shamed once again, because that's the thing about this. The shaming of the institutions in the institutions is being carried out to this very day by the Irish government, by the education ministers who set up the redress themselves to prevent an onslaught of cultural abuse that was the doorway to the truth of children being abused within those institutions. And they knew they had our identity taken from us. They knew they cut us away from our families. And the Kenny said that nobody came back, knocking on the door taking your kids away. No nuns. he hasn't got a clue. The man was talking, whistling out his backside because he does not know anything. He would never understand why and how these things happen because he didn't care. None of his family cared. Nobody cared in this country in politics. Not even the Social Democrats. Nobody. I don't care if you're Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael or Labour, all of them. Nobody cared. We were in those institutions. Christ almighty. Thousands of children.
How many in total? Do you have a number?
Well, the Ryan, if anybody wants to look it up, look up the Ryan report. All the institutions are in there. All the examinations. This is not just a made up story. This is literally, it's in record that these places were not fit to be running children's lives. They were disgusting. They were terrible. There was torture going on in these places, and yet they were allowed to do so. Yet the reports were going through. Now they're trying to now they set up reports today on how sick and how feeble and how mentally disrupted these people are. Hang on a second. We survived their abuse. So who's the one who the reports should be? There's no reports being done on any of the priests or any of the politicians that were involved in running of the institutions, and they should be brought forward and examined once again. Why did they allow these institutions in Ireland? And that has to be answered. I don't care who they are, they have to answer for it. The Education Minister's office needs to wake up and be confronted completely about what was going on and up to the 75 when they closed the doors of the industrial schools. They have to be made accountable. Oh, they have the answers. They have the answers. They're still trying to cover that up. And they invented a 50-50 deal on, again, to take away the donations of the compensation, which is a fraction of the cost of what these families had suffered. Not just the children, the families. Family life should be protected if it's a country. You don't have a country, you don't have the family. The politics are just trusted people put in power, and they failed. And they should be made accountable and question, why did these institutions happen? And every single university has let down the institutions as well, because there's false reports going around trying to say that they're... Look, I'll tell you, put it this way, Detlef. The reports are being made by CEOs of things like Cara Nua, right? They were written down, and they were only taken from 100 survivors. And these survivors were getting funded by this report, which was run by the religious orders again. This is how shocking this is. The reality. They have set this up, and they're not in any place to be writing these records, but they've not written one record on the Christian brothers who were raping and beating up children, or any nuns. No reports were done on these people, but they were done on the institutions, on the survivors of the institutions themselves. The sexual, physical and mental abuse was set up for one purpose and one purpose only: to put doubt into words and to turn them into mentally deranged people having a go at the state and the church. How dare they? How dare they? They abused our families. They took our families. Rather than provide services for the nation of the Irish family, they took it. And now they're building corporations with it. They're disgusting. And they should not be in power. They should never got to power.
Okay, so I hope listeners heard that. So let's try to be productive. What can we do? I mean, is there if listeners say, yeah, we would like to help you and we would like to get involved somehow, and is there a possibility to join a Facebook group or?
Well, I set up a Facebook group. Like, I'm glad you brought that up, Detlef. Good man. I set up a Facebook group called Survivors Who Stand Together, and it was a good one. It was faced one way and one way only, for the truth, that we were slaves, children, slaves.
Okay, so what I can do, because this this subject is so hot, and you know, I mean, I'm not a journalist, and I can't give you now an answer about that. You know, I just can say, okay,
I'm not, yeah, I understand where you come from. You know, I wouldn't expect anything from you, Detlef. You can to something that's been avoided all this time, but it's time to wake up and say the redress was not what we wanted. It was what the state wanted. It was the state who called the shots. So it was the banks who wanted to hand out loans while the redress was being set up. It was there's a lot of things wrong here. There's a lot of things on how they handled it. And you cannot ask for a redress on sexual, physical and emotional abuse when you've also got spiritual abuse. You've got the cultural abuse was the doorway to what happened in these institutions. These institutions should never have been invented. And if they were going to be set up, they should have been set up professionally and carefully planned. That's what you expect from an Irish government. Something to be carefully planned. Not like a dump to throw in a sewer, to throw poor people in because you do not want to be paying out to help humanity. This is disgrace. This is the dark secrets behind those graves. Look at those. The country is now scarred. The landscape is scarred by all these institutions that are crumbling, right?
Do you think
the cries of those children are still ringing out to this very day?
Do you think that there are still people in the government who would wish the times from the 50s or the 60s back?
Look, no, I know there are some very good politicians today. I've got to say there are, and they stood up for. They stood up for, and they said, "Look, we have to clean this out.
Yeah,
you have to clean it out. You have to." Sorry, my breath is gone. You have to deal with this. You can't keep putting it under the carpet. Now, I'm shocked on how the education ministers throughout, since the time of redress or before it, have handled survivors. I think the education minister's office is a joke. It needs to be questioned. It needs to be put on the stand and questioned for its behaviour towards those who suffered these institutions, because there's absolutely nothing in place now for their children. They said the redress was supposed to be an education fund. It was already a fund that was already in place for the poor. It's in place to this day. It's the same fund. It was not set up for the survivors. It was already in place. How dare they try and pull that one? Because I can prove to you that they actually use legislation against the survivors constantly. They use legislation to prevent, not to provide services, again, for the same people that went through the institute, who are still trying to manage with a life they don't understand. And they're working their hands off it and patting each other on the back for getting away with it. The statutory fund was supposed to be the compensation to the survivors, plus the interest rate. If we could have actually, never mind, this is what the Education Minister's office said. With this time there's no gravy train. It was on ArTEEtude there. No gravy train. Right, okay, no gravy train. Why? Because they didn't want a legal office. They didn't want us as survivors to get a legal office. They funded groups. Would you believe this? They funded groups who were not qualified. They were not even vetted by the guards, right? To lead and to speak on behalf of survivors who they never even asked. These people are already in the pocket. They were in the pocket. They led survivors into the redress. They led survivors into the Caranua Fund, and then try to deny it afterwards. We can prove that they've done this. No, Barry was threatened as right at place and kicked out. There was a question of fraud. Nobody's gone after the people who frauded that office. Nobody.
I mean, I'm sorry that Well, the lack of my education, I can't say anything about that now. You know, I mean, I didn't.
But it's the whole system, Detlef. It's the whole system since we were children till our whole lives are being screwed around with by corrupt politicians who just want to grab the money and then get a pat on the back from in the middle of a banking crisis in 2008, 2009, whatever it was. They said, oh, we're going to build a children's hospital. Hello, you just told the country they're going to be billions for the next generations to come to pay it back. And they took, where did they get this huge hospital from?
Yeah.
They took our money to start it off and get a pat each other on the back, and now it's got up to 3 billion. Now that institution is a modern institution. What's going to happen? All these families again are going to suffer. Families out here that live, families in rural Ireland, all over rural Ireland, are going to have to find time off their jobs. Their jobs are going to be at risk. The mortgages are going to be at risk because they could have very sick children who are going to be sent to Dublin. Then they're going to have to foot the bills for B&Bs, hotels and whatever. Or they have to go up there and they fear clamping just because they're trying to get to see the very sick children. And only the family will be allowed in. And they won't be allowed to bring food in there for contamination, so they'll have to pay the Dublin prices. This is going to be massive bills for these poor families. You know, it's another institution. And that's what happens. It's an architectural building that's going to be, they're more proud of the architectural building than what they are going to be of the poor families who are going to struggle to go up there. What's wrong with the hospitals where we live? We could go and visit our sick children if they're sick. You know? I feel sorry for families in Ireland. I really do. To this very day. Not just my childhood, but today. You know? The Irish family has to be protected. And it's about time that's the only way you're going to bring Ireland to any sort of order, is to look at the Irish family and protect it.
I think, Robert, thank you very much for that. I think people hear you, you know, and I'm happy to give you this platform to bring that on, because are you okay? I mean, I know it is a very, very, very hard subject. I know. And dear listeners, I know it is normally not a political podcast what I'm gonna run. ArTEEtude should be about art and about attitude, but it is as well necessary that subjects like this come on the table. So sorry for being so inconvenient on a Sunday morning where podcasts start at 10 o'clock. Instead going to church and having the mass, you have to listen sometimes to a history of truth like this. I would say, Robert, as well, in order to not to overwhelm everyone completely, because it is a very, very, very strong and hard subject. And I think in this 20 minutes, we had a lot of informations in it. It was about the present, and it was like to see how I'm not saying victims abused by the Catholic Church, because that is as well another subject, but it is we started in the first podcast about identity, you know, and I mean, unfortunately we had already an hour talk last Sunday and all the material disappeared, so it is a very, 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 very strong subject. So I think, Robert, we continue in the third part. Do you want to add anything now in the second part? What maybe?
No, just to say that in the second part of this interview, that I really want to
talk. I'm not interviewing, Robert.
No,
I'm not interviewing.
No, of course. I've got to say this. You've got to imagine a child who's been nothing but a slave, thrown out in the street, back to where they came from. The very families they were arrested from. Nothing had changed. Poverty was still there. Everything was still there. The apples had grown back on the trees many, many times. So, you know, some children were sentenced because they took an apple off a tree. For God's sake, you know. This is how disgusting this is. And these people are alive. And sadly, a lot of them have died since the redress.
Yeah.
But you know something? You've got to remember, some of our families, generations of our families have had to go through the same institutions. And we were judged as our parents were judged back then. So we are being judged today according to what was judged back then. And we are being judged according to how they treated us and how they expected us. But there's not one service as in support, as in a proper education service to help these families to support their children. And yet these people are expected to come and pay out of their own pocket for something that was robbed from them in the first place.
Sure. So on that note, I already would say let's leave it like this for now, Rob. People can look into the links. I put everything in the description, and I would say, dear listeners, if you're interested in this subject, or actually I would like to talk with Robert how he came out of all this situation in his third part as an artist, because I think the subject is covered with 40 minutes, and we should change it a little bit for the third part. So if you guys interested how a survivor of the institutions getting on with his life, please follow the third part and join us next Sunday at 10 o'clock. And I say goodbye. Bye, Rob. Thank you very much.
Listen to ArTEEtude.
You're welcome.
West Cork's first art, fashion and design podcast. ArTEEtude, never so close again. That was too close.